Kefalas with Grassroots Institute. Ted, it is good to see you.
Hey, Rick. Good to be back with you.
Been a while, a couple months, month or two, something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. But always a good time when we get a chance to chat.
I have a spare shirt in the filing cabinet if you wouldn't mind changing out of the one you're wearing.
Yeah, go Lions after last night. That was a heck of a start to the football season, and you love to see it, just that it was a great game, and love that my Lions came out on top, so it's one of the few times that I can wear this shirt out in public.
Wow. I think you should work with John Matthews on this segment because he's a Lions fan, and you'd sing out of the same hymnal.
Oh, perfect. We're few and far to come by, so it's good to have someone else there, but repping the Honolulu Blue.
There you go. I love it. Love it. Let's jump in. We have time together. Grassroots Institute, of course. Ted, I'm just going to start with it's Maui 1 month later. Your thoughts?
Well, I think, the dust is still kind of settling and the community is still very clearly angry about what happened. A lot of people obviously know President Biden pledged the $700 to Lahaina residents that were affected by the fires. But there were also private organizations. So there's groups like Hawaii Community Foundation, their Maui Strong Fund. They have raised well over $100 million for victims of the fire. And that's a huge number. There are other groups out there, the Red Cross, that are doing amazing work in coordination with the state, local, and federal government. The cleanup efforts are still underway, right? If you see pictures and whatnot, it's dotted with crews dressed head to toe in hazmat gear and hard hats, and it's a pretty hard sight to see. And unfortunately, a lot of people are not going to be able to get back to their land for a little while the cleanup efforts are going on. So right now, crews from the Environmental Protection Agency, they're going property to property looking for hazardous materials, things like propane tanks, batteries, fertilizers, that might have been in the wreckage. And, officials have warned that could go on for months, which, is pretty unnerving if you have a property in the affected area. So far, I think I saw that they've cleared about 340 properties. It's close to like 15% of the area. So it just goes to show you how much there is left for them to do. But, once this process is done, then they're going to have to remove all of the ash and debris and whatnot before we can even really start rebuilding. It's a shame. FEMA reported, I think, about close to 6,000 people are currently staying in hotels and whatnot, funded by the state and Red Cross. But then there's also, I mentioned earlier, some of the private organizations, Airbnb, for all the victimization that they face, and people want to point fingers when it comes to short-term rentals. They've been a huge partner in this, in trying to house people that have been displaced. Wow.
There is, we talk about the proverbial onion and peeling back a layer and another and another. We're engaged in a great deal of speculation of what it's going to take. I, in the last hour, concentrated on the folks who have suffered, continue to suffer, and the help and assistance we can provide. But also, when questions are asked, answers are demanded. Now, the governor is going to make a public address at noon today, and we'll cover it here. But I want to get your take just in two areas of truth and transparency, of your observational assessment of how that's going. And I think I may have an idea, because you started by saying that there's anger within the communities.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of anger because there's a lot of questions that are still left unanswered. If you listen to the mayor's recent video, there were a lot of kind of statements that didn't really get to the bottom of anything. And so the one kind of encouraging thing is that, Speaker McCarthy came, visited, and I think the U.S. House Oversight Committee is going to open up a probe into exactly what happened, and the kind of response efforts there. I know there's also been talk, Governor Green initially, once everything happened, talked about a special session. I don't know that there's been a ton of movement on that yet, but you never know. That being said, I know the State House, Speaker Psyche, and they are in the process of setting up several working groups. And I believe those are going to be led by Reps Ichiyama and Rep Kila. Mm-hmm. And so they're trying to gather more information on the disaster response, what can be done to make sure that this doesn't happen again, not just on Maui, but you look at the west side of Oahu. That's a very prone area too to wildfires, and Big Island as well. So what can we do to make sure that this doesn't happen again elsewhere? And then looking forward, what can we do to make sure that our economic situation is such where we're promoting regrowth and rebuilding in Lahaina, as well as throughout the state? I mean, we need to be in a position where we are one of the top states for business, and unfortunately, we usually rank towards the end.
Mm-hmm. I want to thank you for leading off that, because it is obviously so very top of mind, and 1 month later. But explain the role of Grassroots Institute of Hawaii in the public domain.
Sure. Well, I do want to say real quick a few things that we've been looking at, especially with the Maui fire situation, and a few things that I hope that the state government can look at. One would be passing a uniform emergency volunteer practitioner policy, which essentially it suspends licensing requirements during an emergency for healthcare providers. We saw a similar proposal in the past, and the governor has done, he's included that in his emergency proclamation. But we need something that's more permanent. There's, I believe, 19 states that are doing something that have adopted something similar to this. And that's important because, in Hawaii, we face a lot of natural disasters and emergencies. So, at the Grassroots Institute, we're really looking to try to find solutions and looking forward. I think there's other organizations that are looking at some of the causes right now, and that'll come out. But we're really focused on how can we try to, like I said, promote that economic regrowth and rebirth of Hawaii so that we can be leading the country in a lot of these things. Another thing that I'm really hoping that they can at least look at is creating a state water protocol. We saw in Maui water so crucial that they couldn't fight the fires with the water. I mean, I saw so many stories that there were these there were these wants to divert the waters from the streams to help fight some of these fires, and they weren't able to. So we need to have some sort of a state water code change, something that, I think there was a bill back in 2022 that would have done this. It specified that fire safety is a beneficial use of water, which to me, I think that is a beneficial use of water, but there may be some others that disagree with that. And then, I think finally, when looking at Maui, we need to create some sort of a formal response and a formal plan on the use of emergency sirens. So many folks were angry that there was no use of the sirens, and that, everything that they had heard from county and state officials, it was too late. So, how can we try to fix that in the future and make sure that the people are able to respond in the right way?
We're talking with Ted from Grassroots Institute. It is 8:19 in the morning. I'm going to get back to my question. Tell us about the role of Grassroots Institute.
Yeah, so Grassroots Institute, we're really trying to work to promote lowering the cost of living in Hawaii, looking at holding the government accountable, keeping the transparency in government. A lot of times, officials try to hide behind this legalese and mumbo jumbo, and so we're really trying to break it down for the individual that just wants to know what's happening in government. And so, looking at ways to also get government out of the way. There's so many businesses and folks that face government restrictions and regulations all too often, and it's our job to be there and stand up for the little guy.
Nani Medeiros. Who is Nani Medeiros, and why is this newsworthy?
Yeah, so a lot of people saw Nani Medeiros. She is the state, or was the state chief housing officer, and she recently resigned yesterday, and that's big news because obviously the state is facing a housing shortage, and she was appointed to help, try to mitigate that, try to find solutions to that, and get everybody together. Unfortunately, she was chose to resign after some pressure from outside groups and people. And it's really sad because she was somebody that was really committed to trying to address this housing crisis. It goes to show you, though, how difficult it is to get things done in government. That being said, I think Nani made some real momentum for us, and it's up to us to carry the torch for her. I watched that most recent Build Beyond Barriers working group, and like I said, it was clear that there was anger in the community. And I do think there's justifiable concern when you're talking about this emergency proclamation and the governor overstepping his bounds. Again, the Grassroots Institute is committed to looking for transparency and holding the government accountable. But I do want to be crystal clear, this emergency proclamation was something that it was, created from years of inaction from our state and county elected officials. So, we can't continue to do nothing and expect the problem to just go away. Meanwhile, our families, our neighbors, and our communities are really dissolving, and they're moving to the mainland. Why is that? Because our housing is so expensive. So, a lot of it has to do with these exclusionary zoning laws that are, actually pretty racist in their origin, and they're explicitly designed to make housing unaffordable for the working class. These are things like single-family zoning, minimum lot sizing, minimum parking requirements, and ADU limits. I know everybody wants to have a big green yard with a nice white picket fence, but it isn't the reality for so many people in Hawaii. I think we really need to get rid of some of these restrictions and allow people to be able to build homes here more easily. The problem is only going to get worse in the wake of these Lahaina fires. We have so many people that are now displaced. They don't have their homes. They don't have their jobs. So we really need action now.
So there was action with the emergency proclamation. There are concerns about seizure of land, acquisition of land, categorization of land that will fall under the auspices of the state. I know that there's a lot of legalese we don't have time to get into, so that's some of the reactionary positions that people are taking. But to get a little more beyond Lahaina, previous to $600 million plus allocation for Hawaiian homelands, etc., Kali Watson, new director, previous and now new, is looking for expansion and even more, quote-unquote, investment. Question, where the hell's the money going?
Yeah, that is a good question. And I think we see this all too often with government projects, right? We see it with the rail. We saw it now with the Hawaiian Homelands Project. And, that is why at Grassroots Institute, we are big proponents of the private sector doing a lot of these projects and taking on a lot of the risk so that the taxpayers aren't paying for it. Unfortunately, Hawaii is the second highest tax burden state in the country. And a lot of that is left paying for pet projects that we see from politicians every year. So, you mentioned the emergency proclamation. I don't want there to be an emergency proclamation. I want the counties to take the lead and change a lot of these housing laws for good and make a permanent change. But that being said, I'm glad that the governor and his administration are kind of singing the same tune that we've been singing for years. The proclamation connects the dots between overregulation and high housing prices. So, we at least are hopeful that this can jumpstart really the private sector in developing homes and just increasing our supply.
But that under his proclamation, isn't it unilateral that it has to be led by the state? Because they're the ones that are bypassing permitting and other regulations. If a private developer says, I want to help, I want to build some affordable housing, are they afforded the very same the state realizes in their projects?
Well, you can now apply to this Beyond or Build Beyond Barriers working group, and they can approve the project. Now, I think with Nani's resignation, there's a lot that gets thrown into limbo and seeing who gets appointed next. But private developers are encouraged to apply to this and really try to cut through a lot of the red tape, because it's one of the things that we hear all too often is a developer has to go from this agency to this agency to this agency, and it takes 10 years by the time they're finally through the process. Well, this Build Beyond Barriers, it's BBB group,
right?
They are really getting everybody together in one room, trying to get the approval in one shot. Let's get this thing passed. If you watch the meeting, unfortunately, the most recent meeting, they didn't approve anything yet. So we're still waiting on that, and unfortunately, Nani's resignation again may throw a wrench into things. But we're hopeful that that is something that can jumpstart development and really, like I said, increase supply, because we want to, we all too often talk about stopping demand and getting rid of foreign investors and short-term rentals, but really we need to increase the supply.
827. Last question, and that pertains to the Council on Revenues. What do you portend for COR, and what our condition is here at home?
Yeah, so Council on Revenues met yesterday, and for those that don't know, the council prepares estimates of the state government each fiscal year, and they meet about 4 times a year, so each quarter. The Governor Green, was actually there, and he made some remarks to begin the meeting. It was kind of interesting. He said he may waive the TAT for people that are offering rentals to people that were displaced Maui residents, and also potentially FEMA and other response personnel. That part was a little unclear. But, in addition, the governor expressed his desire to reopen West Maui in October. And that's big news. So I believe he mentioned that his preference would be to reopen West Maui to Kamaina early October, and then potentially have other visitors late November and December. But we'll see if that date changes. One thing that was really kind of an interesting tidbit, Governor Green said the U.S. Department of Energy is coming to Hawaii soon, and he thinks we may be approved for a hydrogen hub. That could be, several $1 billion. I think they asked for about $2.1 billion from the federal government. And, that's exciting because it has the potential to limit some of the price volatility that we see and reduce energy costs as the state makes this controversial turn to 100% renewable energy. But back to your question, overall tax revenues were down actually 1.4%. And I do want to note that that's actually from before the fire. A lot of those taxes were collected from businesses in July, so we won't know exactly, what the effects were and how much the state lost from fire-related tourism drop for a little while now. But looking at the U.S. economy as a whole, Carl Bonham, he is an economist from UHERO. He said they do not expect the country to enter into a recession. So for the past year, everybody's been suggesting that we would see one in 2024, but luckily the good news is, not necessarily an economic boom, but it doesn't look like we're going to go through a recession.
Well, we could do another half hour on that in definition of term and what reality is. But that said, we're already at 8:30 in the morning. Final in 20 seconds. Explain once again the significance of the Council on Revenue with the budgetary forecast and how it affects state budgeting.
Yeah, so the Council on Revenues, like I said, they estimate how much the state is projected to bring in, and a lot of times legislators and the governor base their budgets and projections on what the Council on Revenues is saying and what they project out. So, kind of these meetings are important to understand what they foresee and what they forecast, and a lot of times our elected officials are looking to them as to the guiding light in a lot of these policy decisions.
Well, that's actually constitutional that they must adhere. So
absolutely.
Very profound. Once again, Ted, thank you. so very much. Congratulations on the game last night. And don't do that when we play. If the Lions come back and destroy our Bears, brother, that's a yeah.
You may not have a guest that week.
I was going to say, well, I'll be taking the week off. So there we go. Ted, thanks so very much.
Yeah, thank you, Rick. Appreciate it.